The conference room aboard the Zenith capital ship, Starfire, was filled with a tense silence. Leaders from the various alien races that comprised the Zenith Alliance were gathered around a large holographic table displaying the latest war reports. The mood was grim. The relentless Crocs invasion had pushed their defenses to the brink of collapse. General Kale, a towering figure with a stern expression, broke the silence. "We are out of options," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of countless battles. "Our fleets are decimated, our resources nearly exhausted. We need a new strategy." Diplomat Zira, a member of the telepathic Valorian race, nodded in agreement. "The Crocs have outmaneuvered us at every turn. Our conventional tactics are failing. We need something, or someone, unconventional." An uneasy murmur spread through the room. The idea had been floated before, but it was radical. They were considering reaching out to a species they had long considered primitive and underdeveloped: humans. "We've analyzed their history," Zira continued. "Humans have shown remarkable ingenuity and adaptability in combat. If we can secure their assistance, it might turn the tide in our favor." Reluctantly, the leaders agreed. An urgent message was sent to Earth, outlining their dire situation and pleading for help. Days later, a human delegation arrived, led by a man who would soon become pivotal to their survival. Jonathan Drake stepped off the transport ship, his sharp eyes scanning the bustling alien environment of Astra Prime. He was accompanied by his longtime friend and fellow soldier, Mark Simmons. Both men had seen their fair share of combat, but this was unlike anything they had experienced before. "Welcome to Astra Prime, Captain Drake," Zira greeted them, her voice tinged with both hope and doubt. "And you must be Lieutenant Simmons. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Jonathan nodded. "We received your message. We're here to help, but we need to understand the situation fully. What are we up against?" General Kale joined them, his imposing presence immediately commanding respect. "The Crocs are a formidable enemy," he said. "They are ruthless, highly organized, and possess advanced technology. Our current tactics have proven ineffective." Mark looked at the holographic display of the battlefield. "We've faced tough opponents before, but this looks like an entirely different scale." "Indeed," Kale agreed. "We need your expertise in unconventional warfare. Your records show you've led successful missions in seemingly impossible situations. That's exactly what we need now." Jonathan exchanged a look with Mark. They both understood the gravity of the task ahead. "All right," Jonathan said. "We'll need to see your current strategies and defenses. We need to know where you've been hit hardest and how the Crocs operate." As they walked through the war room, Zira provided a detailed briefing. "The Crocs attack with swift, brutal force. They exploit weaknesses and have no regard for civilian casualties. They've taken several key planets, and their fleet is currently advancing on our homeworld." Jonathan studied the maps and data streams. "We need to hit them where they least expect it. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and psychological warfare. We'll disrupt their supply lines and communications. Make them second-guess their every move." Mark added, "And we'll need full cooperation from your forces. We can't do this alone." Kale looked hesitant but nodded. "You'll have our full support. What do you need to get started?" "We'll need to train a specialized unit," Jonathan said. "Handpick the best soldiers from your forces. We'll also need access to your intelligence and any technology that can give us an edge." Zira led them to a secured area where a group of Zenith soldiers awaited. "These are our elite," she said. "They're the best we have." Jonathan and Mark spent the next several hours evaluating the soldiers, testing their skills and explaining human combat techniques. The soldiers were quick to learn, adapting to the new strategies with surprising speed. As the training progressed, a bond began to form between the human soldiers and their Zenith counterparts. Mutual respect grew as they shared stories of past battles and strategies. Jonathan and Mark's hands-on approach and willingness to fight alongside them earned the trust of the Zenith soldiers. By the end of the week, the new unit was ready. Jonathan stood before them, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "We're about to undertake the most critical mission of this war," he said. "Our goal is to strike deep into Crocs territory, disrupt their operations, and force them to divert their forces. It won't be easy, but together, we can do it." The soldiers, a diverse mix of alien races and humans, nodded in unison. They were ready. Jonathan turned to Kale and Zira. Jonathan Drake and Mark Simmons were escorted through the sprawling architecture of Astra Prime, the Zenith capital. The city was a dazzling array of towering structures and glowing energy grids, reflecting the technological advancements of the Zenith Alliance. However, the scars of war were evident. Damaged buildings and hurried military movements spoke of recent attacks. Upon arrival at the military headquarters, General Kale and Diplomat Zira were there to greet them, along with a contingent of Zenith's top military officers. Kale's gaze was penetrating, sizing up the human newcomers with a mix of curiosity and reservation. "Captain Drake, Lieutenant Simmons, welcome," Kale began, his voice resonant in the vast hall. "You've seen our situation firsthand. We hope your journey here was enlightening." "It's more severe than we anticipated," Jonathan replied, not mincing words. "But it's nothing we can't handle. We're ready to get to work immediately." Zira, sensing the tension, interjected smoothly. "Let's begin with introductions. Understanding who we are will help in fostering better cooperation." She gestured towards a few notable leaders from various races, each nodding or offering a gesture of their species equivalent to a handshake. As the meeting progressed, Jonathan and Mark were briefed on the specifics of their mission. Their first task was to reinforce the defenses of Astra Prime, which had been weakened under the relentless Crocs assaults. "We've set up a command center for you," Zira explained as she led them to a high-tech war room filled with holographic maps and data streams. "Here, you can coordinate with our forces and begin planning your operations." Mark, expert in tactical defenses, took immediate interest in the layout. "We need to fortify these sectors," he pointed out on the hologram, indicating the city's vulnerable points. "Anti-aircraft turrets here, here, and here. Ground forces can be rallied at these junctions for rapid deployment." Jonathan, meanwhile, focused on the offensive strategies. "Our best chance is to take the fight to them. We disrupt their supply lines and communications as we discussed. Hit-and-run tactics, sabotage missions, and drawing them into unfavorable terrain where our tech can give us an edge." General Kale, initially skeptical, was slowly nodding, seeing the strategic acumen behind Jonathan's words. "Your methods are unconventional, but these are desperate times. We'll provide whatever resources you need." "Thank you, General," Jonathan said, appreciating the gesture of trust. "We'll also need real-time intelligence. The quicker we get information, the more effective we can be." As the plans took shape, Mark and Jonathan trained with the Zenith troops, blending human combat techniques with alien technology. The Zenith soldiers, initially wary of the humans, gradually warmed up to their new allies as they saw their expertise and commitment to the cause. One evening, after a long session of drills, Jonathan and Mark shared a quiet moment overlooking the city from a high vantage point. Mark broke the silence. "Think we made the right call coming here?" he asked. Jonathan glanced at him, then back at the city. "This war, it's bigger than any we've fought. But look at them, Mark. They're fighters like us, and they believe we can make a difference. That's worth fighting for." Mark nodded, his doubts eased by Jonathan's conviction. "Then let's make sure we win this for them." The following days were a blur of preparations and plans. Under Jonathan and Mark's guidance, Astra Prime's defenses were shored up, and the first of their offensive operations was set into motion. The human strategies of guerrilla warfare, coupled with Zenith technology, began to show results, harassing Crocs forces and slowing their advance. One night, as they reviewed the outcomes of their latest operations, a report came in. A Crocs battalion had been spotted moving towards a critical supply route. "This is our chance to test our full capabilities," Jonathan declared, looking to Mark and the rest of their team. "We strike at dawn." The mood in the war room was electric, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. This would be their first major engagement since their arrival, and its outcome could well decide the fate of Astra Prime. As the night deepened, Jonathan and Mark finalized their plans, set on delivering a decisive blow that would not only protect the Zenith capital, but also send a clear message to the Crocs. Humanity was here, and they were a force to be reckoned with. As the first rays of light crept over the horizon, Jonathan Drake and his team, alongside a select group of Zenith warriors, readied themselves for the mission ahead. The tension was palpable, a mix of anticipation and the heavy weight of what was at stake. The plan was audacious. A direct assault on a Crocs supply convoy moving through a narrow valley, a perfect choke point for an ambush. "Remember, speed and stealth," Jonathan instructed as they approached the target area aboard a Zenith stealth craft. "We hit them hard and fast, then vanish before they can regroup." Mark Simmons, overseeing the weapons systems, nodded in agreement. "Explosives are primed and escape routes are clear. We're good to go." As they neared the valley, the Crocs convoy came into view. dozens of armored vehicles guarded by heavily armed troops. The Zenith pilot maneuvered the craft into position silently, thanks to its advanced cloaking technology. Jonathan turned to his team. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, now. The stealth craft's doors slid open, and the team rappelled down into the shadows of the valley. They moved quickly, setting up explosives and taking up strategic positions. Within minutes, the trap was set, and all eyes turned to Jonathan for the signal. He gave the nod, and the valley erupted in a maelstrom of fire and chaos. Explosives detonated with precision, ripping through the convoy, sending Croc's vehicles and soldiers into disarray. Jonathan and his team opened fire, their advanced Zenith weaponry cutting through the enemy ranks with lethal efficiency. The Crocs, caught off guard, scrambled to return fire, but the element of surprise was against them. Jonathan's team moved like shadows, striking swiftly and retreating before the Crocs could pinpoint their locations. Move to Phase 2, Jonathan ordered, his voice calm despite the adrenaline. The team fell back to secondary positions, continuing their assault. The Crocs, now realizing the threat, began to push back harder, their superior numbers starting to tell. Mark, monitoring the battlefield, called out, "We've got heavy reinforcements incoming. Time to pull out." Jonathan assessed the situation. "All units, fall back to Extraction Point Bravo. Move." The team retreated under the cover of smoke bombs, their movements practiced and precise. As they reached the extraction point, the stealth craft descended swiftly, providing cover fire as the team boarded. Within moments, they were airborne, the valley a burning testament to their success behind them. As they made their escape, Jonathan debriefed with his team. "Casualties?" he asked, his voice tense. "None," replied a Zenith warrior, her tone relieved. "All present and accounted for." "Good. Damage assessment?" Mark chimed in. "We've taken out at least half of the convoy, including 2 ammo depots and a command vehicle. Their advance will be stalled for sure." Jonathan nodded, satisfied with the outcome. "This strike will give us the breathing room we need. Well done, everyone." Back at Astra Prime, the mission was hailed as a significant victory. News of the successful ambush spread quickly, boosting the morale of the Zenith Alliance forces. General Kale, who had been skeptical of the humans' unorthodox methods, now showed a newfound respect for Jonathan and his team. "You've given us more than just a victory, you've given us hope," Kale admitted as he met with Jonathan to discuss the operation's impact. Jonathan, while pleased with the results, remained focused. "We need to capitalize on this. It's just the beginning. The Crocs will retaliate and we need to be ready. We strike again while they're still reeling." Plans were quickly drawn for further operations. The success of the first strike had not only demonstrated the effectiveness of human tactics, but it also galvanized the Zenith troops, who were now more eager than ever to learn from Jonathan and his team. The war was far from over, but Jonathan Drake and his human Zenith coalition had begun to turn the tide, one daring strike at a time. As they prepared for the next mission, the unity and strength they had forged in the fires of combat would be their greatest weapon. The success of their first major strike against the Crocs had invigorated the Zenith Alliance. Plans for further operations flowed swiftly, each more ambitious than the last. However, amidst these preparations, an underlying tension began to brew within the ranks of the Alliance. A tension that would soon culminate in an unexpected betrayal. Jonathan Drake, ever vigilant, noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere during the strategy meetings. Whispered conversations would halt as he approached, and datapads would quickly shut down. Sensing something amiss, he discussed his concerns with Mark Simmons. "There's a leak somewhere," Jonathan concluded, his expression dark. "Our plans are too well countered. It's like they know our moves before we make them." Mark nodded in agreement. "I've noticed some irregularities in the comms logs. Someone's been accessing the battle plans outside of the authorized times." Determined to root out the traitor, Jonathan and Mark set up a discreet surveillance system to monitor the war room and the main communication arrays. It wasn't long before they caught a high-ranking Zenith officer, Commander Vorin, secretly transmitting data to an unknown recipient. Armed with this evidence, Jonathan and Mark confronted Vorin in a secure location, away from the eyes and ears of the Alliance. "Vorin, why?" Jonathan asked, the betrayal stinging more than he anticipated. Vorin, his facade crumbling, struggled for words. "The Crocs promised safety for my people. We were losing, Drake. You've seen the devastation. I had to think of a future, any future. By dooming the rest of us?" Mark interjected, his disappointment heavy in his voice. Before more could be said, General Kale and several security officers entered the room, having been alerted by Jonathan beforehand. "Commander Voren, you are under arrest for treason against the Zenith Alliance," Kale declared sternly, his disappointment evident. Voren was taken away, his head hung in shame. The revelation of the traitor sent shockwaves throughout the Alliance. Kale, addressing the Leadership Council, which included Jonathan and Mark, expressed his profound betrayal. "This act of treason has endangered us all. It has weakened our position and our morale," Kale announced to the room. "But we must stand united. We cannot let the actions of one individual define us." Turning to Jonathan, Kale continued, "Your role in uncovering this betrayal has only solidified my trust in you and your team. We must tighten security and be vigilant." Jonathan, though satisfied with the resolution, knew the damage was done. "We need to reassess our strategies. The Crocs will know they've been fed misinformation soon enough, and they'll adjust their tactics." "Agreed," Kale responded. "I want you and Simmons to lead the overhaul, reevaluate our defenses, and plug any potential leaks." As they set about this task, the bond between the human and Zenith forces grew stronger. The betrayal had ironically served to unify them, as they collectively recognized the greater threat that loomed outside their ranks. Mark took charge of resecuring the communication networks, implementing new encryption protocols and limited access measures. Jonathan, meanwhile, worked closely with the tactical teams, adjusting their strategies and preparing them for what was likely to be a fierce Crocs counterattack. The days that followed were tense. Jonathan and his team worked tirelessly, knowing that the stability of the entire alliance hinged on their ability to adapt and respond to the new threat landscape. Each meeting, each training session, and each deployment was conducted with a heightened sense of urgency and a renewed focus on security. During a late-night strategy session, Jonathan leaned over the map table, pointing to a series of potential Crocs targets. "We hit them here and here, keep them off balance and unable to consolidate their forces." Mark, reviewing the latest intelligence reports, added, "And we keep our plans close to the chest. Only the top brass gets full access." The session went deep into the night, with Jonathan and Mark mapping out a series of bold maneuvers designed to exploit the recent shifts in Croc strategy. Their approach was aggressive and risky, but they both knew that bold action was necessary to regain the upper hand. As dawn broke over Astra Prime, the Alliance was not only more secure, but more determined. The sting of betrayal had transformed into a steely resolve to fight back harder, to protect their worlds and their futures. And at the heart of this resolve stood Jonathan Drake and his human comrades, ready to lead the charge into the uncertain days ahead. With tightened security and revamped strategies, Jonathan Drake and the Zenith Alliance prepared for the next phase of the war. The betrayal had been a sharp lesson, but it galvanized their resolve. Now, more than ever, the Zenith forces were united under a common goal: to turn the tide against the Crocs, once and for all. In the command center on Astra Prime, Jonathan pored over the latest intelligence with Mark and General Kale. They were planning a series of coordinated strikes aimed at crippling the Crocs' logistical networks. "We hit their supply depots first," Jonathan proposed, pointing at the holographic map. "Without supplies, their forward bases will be forced to retreat or surrender due to attrition." General Kale, looking more confident in the humans' capabilities than ever, nodded. "Your tactics have proven effective, Captain Drake. We will support your plan with all the resources at our disposal." Mark chimed in, detailing the tactical aspects. "We've got the new stealth fighters ready. They can slip past the Croc sensors and deliver precise strikes. It's time we test them in the field." The first operation was a daring night raid on a major Croc supply depot. Jonathan personally led the strike team, accompanied by a mixed unit of human and Zenith soldiers. As they approached the target, the tension was palpable. Success hinged on perfect execution. Under the cover of darkness, the stealth fighters descended silently towards the depot. Explosive charges were placed strategically, not just to destroy but to cause maximum disruption. Jonathan watched from a distance, a remote detonator in hand. As the explosives ignited, flames lit up the night sky. Secondary explosions from the Croc's munitions magnified the chaos. The strike was a resounding success. Within hours, reports came in of Croc's units retreating from advanced positions, critically low on supplies. Encouraged by this victory, Jonathan pressed the advantage. He proposed a bold new strategy to General Kale, a feint attack on a minor Croc's outpost to draw their forces out of position. followed by a massive assault on their newly exposed flanks. Kale approved the plan, and the Zenith forces mobilized with renewed vigor. The feint was successful. The Crocs, anticipating a major battle, shifted their main fleet to counter the threat. This left their flank vulnerable, just as Jonathan had predicted. The main Zenith fleet, hidden behind a nearby moon, surged forward in a surprise attack. The battle was fierce, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. However, the element of surprise and superior Zenith tactics prevailed. The Crocs fleet was decimated, and their control over the sector was severely weakened. Back on Astra Prime, the mood was celebratory. The Alliance had not only survived, but was now on the offensive. Jonathan and Mark were hailed as heroes, their innovative tactics credited with changing the course of the war. In the aftermath of the battle, Jonathan met with his team to discuss the next steps. "We've got them on the run," he said, a rare smile crossing his face. "But we can't let up now. We need to keep pushing. Keep them disorganized." Mark agreed, his eyes scanning the latest data feeds. "Their command structure is in disarray. It's the perfect time to strike at their leadership, take out the head, and the body will flounder." Plans were drawn for a decisive operation aimed at the Crocs command center. The mission was risky. The command center was heavily fortified and located deep within Crocs-controlled space. However, the potential rewards justified the risk. If successful, it could effectively end the Crocs' threat. As preparations for the mission went underway, Jonathan reflected on the journey so far. From skepticism and betrayal to trust and triumph, the Alliance had come a long way. Now, with victory within their grasp, they were ready to end the war once and for all. With the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, Jonathan and his team prepared for what they hoped would be the final battle. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was their determination to secure peace and freedom for the Zenith Alliance. The mood was tense as Jonathan Drake and his team prepared for the most daring operation yet, an assault on the heavily fortified Crocs command center, Drakenhold. Located on a barren moon orbiting a gas giant in Crocs territory, Drakenhold was a fortress renowned for its impregnable defenses and strategic importance. As the Zenith fleet gathered at a staging point just outside the Crocs sensor range, Jonathan briefed his team. "Drakenhold is the key to their command structure. We take it down, and the Crocs war machine grinds to a halt. This won't be easy, but I know we can do it." Mark Simmons, his second-in-command, reviewed the plan with the Special Operations team. "We'll be using the cover of a meteor shower to mask our approach. Once we're on the ground, it's a straight fight to the command center. Expect heavy resistance." The fleet moved into position, and as the meteor shower began, Jonathan and his team launched in stealth pods, slipping through the Crocs' defenses undetected. The ride was rough, but they landed intact a few kilometers from Drakenhold. The team advanced under the cover of darkness, using the rugged terrain for concealment. As they neared the fortress, the scale of the challenge became apparent. Towering walls and energy barriers protected the fortress, with patrolling guards and automated defense systems on high alert. Jonathan signaled to his team. "Stick to the plan. Use EMPs to disrupt their sensors. We move fast and quiet until we're inside." The initial breach was successful. EMP charges detonated, creating a blind spot in the Crocs' defenses. The team surged forward, entering Drakenhold through a service entrance Mark had identified from satellite imagery. Inside, they encountered fierce resistance. Crocs soldiers, armed and ready, engaged them in brutal close-quarters combat. Jonathan and his team fought back relentlessly, moving deeper into the fortress. As they approached the central command hub, the resistance intensified. Jonathan led a charge, breaking through a barricade into the command center. Inside, they found themselves face-to-face with General Craxus, the Crocs' military leader. Jonathan and Craxus engaged in a tense standoff. "Surrender, Craxus. It's over," Jonathan urged, his weapon trained on the general. Craxus sneered, a mixture of defiance and respect in his eyes. "Humans are formidable, I concede, but the Crocs do not surrender." The standoff was broken by a sudden surge of Crocs reinforcements. Jonathan and his team were forced into a defensive circle, fighting back-to-back as the Crocs closed in. Just as the situation seemed dire, the sound of explosions rocked the fortress. The Zenith fleet, taking advantage of the chaos inside, had launched a full assault on Drakenhold. The outer defenses were crumbling, and Zenith reinforcements poured into the fortress. With the tide turning, Craxus saw the futility of further resistance. He threw down his weapon, signaling his troops to stand down. "You win, human, for now." Jonathan accepted Craxus's surrender, securing the command center. As Zenith troops secured Drakenhold, the victory was clear. The capture of Drakenhold was a critical blow to the Crocs, effectively crippling their ability to wage war. Back at the Zenith headquarters, the news of the victory sparked jubilation. The siege of Drakenhold was not only a strategic triumph, but a symbol of the newfound might and unity of the Zenith Alliance, significantly bolstered by human ingenuity and courage. As celebrations ensued, Jonathan and Mark watched from a distance. "We did it, Mark. Drakenhold is ours, and the Crocs are in disarray." Mark nodded, a smile breaking through the fatigue. "It's a massive win, but there's still work to do. We need to press our advantage, make sure they don't regroup." Jonathan agreed. "The war isn't over yet, but today, we've changed the course of it. Let's make sure it's the beginning of the end for the Crocs." With Drakenhold under their control, the Zenith Alliance prepared for the next phase of the war, determined to leverage their victory into lasting peace. Jonathan and his team, at the heart of this turnaround, were ready to lead the charge, knowing that the hardest battles might still lie ahead. After the fall of Drakenhold, the Crocs' forces were thrown into disarray, their command structure fractured. Jonathan Drake and the Zenith Alliance capitalized on this moment of weakness, launching relentless attacks across multiple fronts to further weaken the enemy. Yet, despite their successes, the Crocs were not a species to surrender easily. They regrouped for one final, desperate assault on the Zenith homeworld, Astra Prime. The Zenith capital braced for the incoming storm. Astra Prime's orbit was fortified with all available defenses, and the ground forces prepared for what could be the final battle. Jonathan and his trusted lieutenant, Mark Simmons, strategized day and night, knowing the importance of every decision made. As the Crocs fleet approached, a tense calm settled over Astra Prime. Jonathan addressed his troops, human and Zenith alike, his voice resolute and inspiring. "This is it, the battle that decides our fate. We stand not just for Astra Prime, but for all free beings in the galaxy. We stand united, and we will prevail." The battle commenced with the Crocs unleashing their full might. Their fleet, though diminished, was still formidable, barraging Astra Prime with devastating firepower. Jonathan coordinated the defense from the command center, directing the Zenith fleet's maneuvers and deploying intercept squads at critical junctures. The skies above Astra Prime lit up with the fires of battle, a chaotic ballet of explosions, laser fire, and the daring maneuvers of pilot heroes. On the ground, Crocs ground forces landed and engaged Zenith troops in fierce combat. The sounds of war echoed through the city streets, a grim symphony of survival. Mark led a rapid response team on the ground, moving quickly to reinforce positions that were in danger of being overrun. His leadership and bravery in the face of overwhelming odds rallied the Zenith troops, who fought with renewed vigor beside their human allies. Meanwhile, in space, Jonathan executed a risky maneuver that turned the tide. He feigned a retreat, drawing the Crocs fleet into a narrow passage between Astra Prime and its moons, where previously hidden Zenith minefields awaited. As he gave the signal, the mines detonated in a massive explosion, crippling much of the Crocs fleet. With the Crocs fleet in disarray, the Zenith forces pressed their advantage. From the command center, Jonathan ordered all ships to converge on the enemy, delivering a crushing blow. The Crocs, realizing their defeat was imminent, began to scatter, their fleet breaking apart under the relentless Zenith assault. On the ground, the news of the fleet's victory energized the troops. Mark, leading from the front, pushed forward, driving the remaining Crocs forces back. The battle for Astra Prime turned decisively in favor of the Zenith Alliance. As the last of the Crocs forces were defeated, a cheer erupted from the Zenith troops, echoing across the planet. The battle for Astra Prime was over, and with it, the war itself. In the aftermath, Jonathan stood before a gathering of troops and leaders from across the Zenith Alliance, his expression one of solemn pride. "Today, we have secured not just a victory, but our future. Together we have faced the darkness, and together we have prevailed." General Cale, standing beside Jonathan, spoke with equal conviction. "Captain Drake, your leadership and the bravery of your team have shown us all the strength of unity and the power of innovation. We are forever in your debt." As the celebrations began, Jonathan and Mark shared a quiet moment away from the crowd. "We did it, Mark," Jonathan said, a slight smile breaking through his exhaustion. "We did it." Mark nodded, clapping Jonathan on the shoulder. "We sure did, but I have a feeling our work here isn't done yet. There's a whole galaxy out there that might need our help. Jonathan looked out over the city, its buildings now lit with the colors of victory. Wherever they need us, we'll be ready. But first, let's enjoy this victory. We've earned it. As the stars shone brightly above, the war was over, but for Jonathan Drake and his team, the journey was just beginning. They had not only saved Astra Prime, but also ensured that humanity would be a respected and integral part of the galactic community for generations to come. The dawn broke over Astra Prime with a radiance that felt symbolic, casting light on a world that had just survived its darkest hours. The streets of the Zenith capital, once filled with the echoes of war, now resonated with the sounds of celebration. Jonathan Drake stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out over the city. The scars of battle were visible, but so was the unbreakable spirit of its people. General Kale joined him, his face carrying a rare smile. It's a new beginning, Captain Drake. Thanks to you and your team, we look to a future filled with hope instead of fear. Jonathan nodded, his thoughts on the soldiers and civilians who had stood strong through the crisis. We all did this together, General. It's their victory as much as ours. In the days that followed, delegations from various planets within the Zenith Alliance arrived on Astra Prime to negotiate the terms of peace and to rebuild the Alliance stronger than ever. The Crocs, their military might shattered, requested armistice talks, and Jonathan was asked to be a part of the peace negotiations. As Jonathan sat across from the Crocs delegates, he felt the weight of each decision. The negotiations were tense, but fair. A peace treaty was drafted, ensuring the Crocs would disarm and demilitarize in return for aid in rebuilding their own worlds. It was a testament to the belief that true victory lay not just in conquest, but in fostering understanding and cooperation. Throughout the rebuilding process, Jonathan worked closely with Mark and other leaders to train and establish a joint defense force, combining human tactics with Zenith technology, ensuring that such a conflict would never threaten their worlds again. One evening, as Jonathan and Mark walked through the newly rebuilt districts of Astra Prime, they reflected on their journey. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Mark asked, gesturing to the bustling streets around them. Jonathan shook his head, smiling slightly. "Never, but I'm glad we took the chance. What about you? Ready to take it easy now?" Mark laughed. "I don't know if I know how to take it easy anymore, but maybe it's time to try." Their conversation was interrupted by a young Zenith child who approached Jonathan with a shy smile, holding up a drawing of Jonathan and Mark standing victorious over a defeated Crocs warlord. "For you, hero," the child said, her voice filled with admiration. Jonathan knelt down, accepting the drawing with a genuine smile. "Thank you, young one. Keep this safe. One day it'll remind you of how you can be a hero too." As the child ran back to her parents, Mark nudged Jonathan. "Looks like you've made a fan." "It's for her and all the future generations that we fought," Jonathan replied, his gaze following the child into the crowd. The reconstruction continued, and with each passing day, Astra Prime grew stronger and more vibrant. Jonathan knew his place was no longer at the forefront of battle, but in helping forge a path towards sustained peace and prosperity. In the final ceremony marking the end of reconstruction, Jonathan was honored with the title of Honorary Guardian of the Zenith Alliance. He accepted not as a conqueror, but as a protector, a title he vowed to uphold with dignity and strength. Standing before the assembly, Jonathan spoke, not just as a soldier, but as a visionary. "Let this be a new dawn, not just for Astra Prime, but for all civilizations seeking peace across the stars. Together, we are unstoppable. Let's build a future where war is only remembered in history books." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices carrying hope and the promise of a new era. As the celebrations continued into the night, Jonathan stood back, a content observer of the peace he had helped achieve. And so, under the endless skies of Astra Prime, a new chapter began for Jonathan, the Zenith Alliance, and the galaxy itself. A chapter of rebuilding, of growth, and of peace. A testament to the enduring spirit of unity and the indomitable will of those who dare to dream of a better tomorrow.